Joining me in the center ring to further explore the rights extended to immigrants is immigration expert Laura Collins of the Bush Institute in Dallas, Texas. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
Laura, you spent a lot of time in Texas, so I'm happy to talk to you and happy to talk to you about something that has been vexing our country for a long time, and that's immigration. And in particular, I have a question for you to start right off with. And there's a lot of confusion about it, and that is, do individuals that are here illegally or even if they have status, do they have any due process rights?
You know, this is actually a really easy question. You don't even need a law degree to find the answer to this. You can just pull up a copy of the Constitution. And it states very clearly places where the Constitution applies to people or persons and places where the Constitution applies to citizens. And for due process rights, it absolutely applies to persons. And what that simply means is that the same rights that extend to you and me as U.S. citizens also extend to them. There are a few exceptions and caveats depending on what has been written into law, but for the most part, immigrants, regardless of their status, have due process rights.
Now, let's make sure everyone's perfectly clear what we mean by due process. Due process means they have a right to a hearing and they put the government to its proof. In other words, if the government thinks you're an illegal immigrant, then they have to basically prove that in hearing. Is that correct?
That is correct in almost every single case. There is an exception called expedited removal, where you don't necessarily need the same sort of hearing in front of an immigration judge, but that is a narrow exception. For the most part, almost every single immigrant here, whether they are here with a status or not, is entitled to a hearing.
Right, and that aspect of the Constitution that delineates the due process rights of individuals is the Fifth Amendment, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and within the Fifth Amendment, they don't refer to citizens, they refer to persons, is that right? And that's the difference, right? So that means because it refers to persons, it means that anybody, whether you're here legally or illegally, you still have due process rights, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, now have courts interpreted that as such?
Yes, I believe so. You know, this is a long-standing area of law. It is not something that is new. And while that process may be slow at times and can be frustrating if you're the government trying to carry out removals, it still exists. And it exists to protect not just the migrants, but it also exists to protect you and me.
Got it. Now, as you know, and we all know, there's different gradations of people here in the United States that are not citizens. You have people that are here completely illegal. You just snuck into the country. You have people that have different statuses, maybe a student visa or here on a work visa or have their green card, whatever. So do the rights differ based on the status that the individual has when they're here?
They do on the margins. I would say that for the sort of big constitutional questions, those protections are the same for everybody. But we know that there are differences according to the type of visa that you have. There are terms to make sure that visa applies. We know you have more protections if you are a legal permanent resident or green card holder, for example. But at the end of the day, if you are subject to removal proceedings, almost every single person who has been marked for removal or has been accused of doing something that would violate their visa has the opportunity for a hearing in front of an immigration judge.
Okay, so you said immigration judge, and that's where I wanted to go next. If you have to have a hearing, you have to have a judge presiding over that hearing, or an individual equivalent to a judge. Do we have enough judges in the country to handle this massive backlog of people that are here illegally?
Immigration judges is one of those places where there is a large bottleneck. This administration has really promised high numbers of removals because of those due process rights. There really aren't enough immigration judges to hear those cases. And that's true whether you're trying to remove people or whether you're looking at the asylum system where people are trying to affirmatively gain a legal status here. There's not enough immigration judges to really hear those cases as well. And so that is a place where there is a significant bottleneck to the process moving quickly.
So has there been an effort to fix this backlog and get more immigration judges? And if there has been an effort, why hasn't it come to fruition?
I feel like every single attempt to reform the last few years has included a proposal to increase the number of immigration judges. You know, you can't just snap your fingers and do it. Even if you increase the funding available, you still have to go hire them, and they are executive branch positions. And so it does take some time to staff up and find people who can be immigration judges. You have to establish, and then they have to find a docket, right? I mean, you've got to find where you're going to put them. So there's, again, a process to that as well. You cannot just simply add immigration judges quickly and expect that the problem will go away, because the backlog right now is millions of cases.
Okay. And there's another aspect of the immigration issue, at least for individuals that are caught at the border on a regular basis. It seems like the extraordinarily high number of individuals caught are now claiming asylum. And if you claim asylum, certain things kick in right away under U.S. law. Could you briefly explain that aspect of it to the American people?
Sure. So if you request asylum, that means that you are afraid of returning to your home country. Under U.S. law, you are entitled to a credible fear interview and a hearing in front of an immigration judge to make sure that we are not sending back people who might be persecuted by their home government, might be tortured. So there are additional rights that come with requesting asylum. For a lot of the folks at the border, it's their only legal pathway to the United States. I know it feels like it's not a legal pathway because we see so many people at the border who are requesting it, but these are people who, even if they qualified for a work visa, for example, there's just not enough of those to go around. Maybe the companies don't recruit in their home country. Maybe they don't have a family member in the United States who could sponsor them, or maybe the green card backlog is too long. So there are a lot of people who are seeking opportunity and freedom, things that we have in the United States. Asylum is a legal pathway for them, and it's one of the only ones available.
Okay, then let me ask one other subject, as long as you got a few minutes left. When they come across the border, for example, or when someone is found to be here illegally, do we have the right to detain them pending the hearing that they're owed?
Yeah, I believe so. I think there's some limitations on that depending on your age. Obviously, there's a limitation on that, not just in the rights sphere, but in the capacity sphere, right? We don't have enough detention beds to detain all of the people who are undocumented here in the United States. We certainly can detain people for amount of time, but it's not necessarily universal, right? We can't. That's why alternatives to detention exist. That is a tool that governments, whether Republican or Democrat administrations, have used over the time to monitor people who are here without authorization, make sure they show up to their court hearings, and so we know where they are. So not everyone gets detained, but there is a right to detain them.
So because of the drastic lack of beds to detain these individuals, people here illegally are arrested, and then they're basically paroled into the country because we simply can't, we don't have the capacity to keep them. Is that right?
You know, I think we have something like 50,000 people detained at the moment. So we do have a fairly large capacity. And with border numbers being low, it's not really the border that's driving those numbers at this point. It's the interior removals. But not everyone is going to be detained. Obviously, if you're a vulnerable population, it may not make sense to detain you. Families in particular are very difficult to detain. There's lots of different safeguards that go into place to make sure that it's the right environment for children, for example. So not everyone is appropriate for a detention environment, so the government has to make decisions on that. We've seen what happens when we try to detain everybody. It quickly results in overcrowding and a situation that is not workable for the agencies, it's not workable for anybody. So, you know, it's a little bit of a capacity issue and a little bit of what makes the most sense to make the system run.
Well, Laura, you shed some great light on a situation that has been a long problem that has vexed many administrations over the years, and I appreciate your insight. Thank you very much.